So how do we balance the needs and desires of the present with our obligations to generations of Nigerians yet to come? Are we looking down the barrel of a long, precarious, apocalyptic future if we don't? That's essentially the argument that the author, columnist and former member of the House of Representatives, Dr. Dakuku Peterside, is making in his rather well-written article which appears in this day newspaper. There is so much decay across all levels, but the one that irks him the most is the morality, or perhaps the immorality, governing the conduct of public affairs in this country. Corruption scandals on a fantastical scale, to quote him, the audacity of sleaze and the abdication of moral responsibility by those charged with handling Nigeria's public affairs in favor of self-interest and material gain. In short, a country that he believes operates in a moral vacuum. Imagine what the future would look like if Nigeria doesn't live by a new value system. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now from our studios in Lagos by the author, columnist and former member of the House of Representatives, Dr. Dakuku Peterside, who is a chieftain of the ruling APC party. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Peterside, for joining us. In your excellent article titled The Morality Question, you warn that Nigerians are looking down the barrel of a long, precarious, apocalyptic future if they don't check the progressive erosion of values in this country. You say that the social, moral order that governs how people behave in a community setting has collapsed in this country. Can you expand on that?
All right, thank you, Charles. Good evening. Now, we have seen the progressive decline of our value system over time. And what we have not come to appreciate is that decay will get to such a time that the fabric of society can no longer hold. And that might just lead to anarchy. And there are many indicators, to show the rather rapid decline, and not just progressive, rapid decline of our value system. In the article under consideration, I took us through historical pathway of how we got to this point. And I'd like to point a few. One is the fact that over time, we started focusing on our own self, individuals, no longer on community. So people became more self-centered. And as it became more self-centered, community suffers for it. The tendency to do good things declined. That's one. Now, two, beyond that is the fact that we began to attach a lot of importance to wealth and material acquisition. We redefined the measure of success and tied it to accumulation of wealth. That changed a lot in society. Then we also have to deal over time with the decay of the family system. Perhaps because of economic pressure, parents no longer have control of their children. Values that were once inculcated with are no longer tenable, and things began to change. And it's been attributed to the Western influence, the influence of globalization, and the fact that even at the family level, we began to focus more, society began to focus more on individuals, on not the family as a unit. Beyond the family, now you look at the religious organizations. They also advocated their own responsibility of moral reinforcement. They too began to preach wealth, began to respect wealth, began to honor wealth. And now, so progressively, we lost it at the family level, at the religious organization level, then at the society level, which is more impactful because that, of course, has greater influence. The kind of influence leaders well in society. So at the family level, it might be isolated. At the community level, you can even isolate it. But when it comes to the conduct of public affairs, it is on a national scale, it is wide, the influence is far-flung. And so that is where we are today. Corruption is literally normalized. Now, it's in fact not just normalized, it's rewarded. Good character and good habit is rather punished, and there are no consequences for bad behavior. I think that's how we got to where we are today.
That's a very important point you make, and I think that last point particularly is very important, because obviously taking moral responsibility, as you contend in your article, is a very good sign of leadership. But we never seem to hear of anyone in Nigeria resigning or taking responsibility for failure, as you mentioned, of oversight, or, you know, because of a systemic failure, complicity in a systemic failure. I mean, why do you think that is the case?
Well, you know, there are two things, two critical reasons why we have the systemic failure that we're all experiencing today. One is the quality and the moral character of leadership. I've said this earlier, that leadership has disproportionate influence on society. When leaders begin to fail, society begins to fail. And that is our experience. If you look at societies that have succeeded, check out the moral standing of their leaders, the quality of leadership they have. And there are many, to cite, many. Whether it's in Singapore, whether it's in Britain, in all societies that have failed, it starts with the leadership. I understand the place of followership. I acknowledge that. I'm not going to ignore the place of followership. But leadership, like I said earlier, has disproportionate influence on society. And so, point number one is the fact that our leaders, you know, became unaccountable, started failing us. We're not living by high moral standards or high ethical standards. That's point number one. Now, two is the fact that followership too, you know, over time, you know, did not demand for accountability from the leaders, did not demand accountability from the leaders. And we started, again, like I said, we allowed leaders focus on individuals, and for little material gain, you know, we sing their praises, we celebrate them, we reward them. The third issue is the fact that there are no consequences for bad behavior and bad ethical standards. I think that's how we lost it in society at the level of public, the level of conduct of public affairs.
And when you make the point that the reward for corruption in Nigeria is that perpetrators are given better opportunities to ply their trade, I mean, presumably you're referring at least in part to your own party, the APC, which has been in government and in power in this country for the last 9 years now.
Well, Charles, I don't think that's very right. It's good to admit that this thing is across board. The People's Democratic Party, the PDP, has been in power from 1999 till 2015, and they've been in power longer than the APC. And so I don't think it's about the political party. Political party is just a platform, but we're talking about moral standards, ethical standards, and it has to do with individuals. What we're also saying is that the institutions of the state is either failing or has failed. Now, institution number one, which should ordinarily serve as guardrail of public morality, is the judiciary. And the judiciary should be blind to whether you are APC or PDP. Now, the other guardrail has to do with the police, which has primary responsibility for enforcement of law and order. Then, of course, lately, we have also created other guardrails, whether Independent Corrupt Practice Commission, EFCC, Code of Conduct Bureau. They are either failing or they are not living up to responsibility. So they should be blind to whether you're PDP, APC, Labour Party, APGA, or whatever party. It has nothing to do with political party. What we're saying is that the systems in the country are failing. They're failing because, again, our leadership is abdicating responsibility, and the followers are not living up to the billing of holding leaders accountable. And so all of us share in the blame of why the moral standards are declining, why things are going south, why things are going wrong. So it's not about political party.
Yes, but you talk about leadership. So obviously whoever is in charge in the country has a greater, there's greater responsibility on them to try and give a clear, discernible moral path and lead by example. But let's get away from, you know, party politics and so on, because I don't want to muddy the very important points that you make in your article. You draw a clear distinction between moralistic political rhetoric, which you say is on the increase, and the actual ability of public officials to achieve moral ends, which you say is in decline.
That's factual. If you notice the tone of politics lately, everybody will tell you presumably that the first thing they want to do is to fight corruption. Meanwhile, corruption is deepening. And so instead of fighting corruption, I think that more people are getting complicit in the act of corruption. And we cited several cases to show that things are degenerating instead of improving. And so it has, like I said earlier, it has a lot to do with leadership. We admit that. Our leadership is failing. We must admit that. And it has nothing to do with party platform. We must hold individuals accountable. We must hold leaders morally responsible. They ought to be role models. Now, but where leaders abdicate that responsibility of serving as role models, where is the hope for society?
And of course, you also make a very interesting point when because I mean, you've mentioned a number of times followership and how important that is. I mean, you cite, for example, you make the point that it's not just officials. I mean, you talk about the murder of military personnel, for example, in Delta State, whilst responding to a distress call, which you also attribute to a failure of morals in the community.
That's right. And so not just in the community, in business, in religious organizations, in communities, like you said, in governmental institutions. You know, we experience, we notice this moral failure in all dimensions. And so if we don't do anything to reorient our people to fix this declining moral standards, then you can be sure that the natural result is anarchy, a society that will not regenerate itself for the future, a society where there is no hope for the future generation.
So, I mean, and that of course also affects democracy, obviously. It stunts the development of democracy and so on. So that point, a very important one. But now we clearly know the problem. What's the best way to solve it? What's the solution? Society is broken. How do you fix it?
Well, I think the starting point should be at the family level. You know, if we begin to emphasize strong moral foundation, it will help. That's one. Now, two, if you progress at the community level, let the community take back the responsibility of enforcing moral standards, holding citizens or members of that community accountable, watching out for, now, de-emphasize individuality, de-emphasize the crave for wealth, celebrating wealth. That's at the community level. Then at the national level, please, can we strengthen the guardrails of national morality? And I had mentioned this earlier. When you talk about the judiciary, let's make sure that the judiciary is truly independent. It is also strengthened to stand up for the truth. Every society that has fallen apart, collapsed, it starts by denying the truth. Now, when judiciary begins to abdicate its responsibility of enforcing the truth, enforcing law and order, society begins to decay. So at the national level, let's strengthen judiciary. Let's strengthen the guardrails of national morality, the institution, the police, you know, and we shouldn't play politics with the police. Equip them. And strengthen, for us in Nigeria, strengthen the ICPC, the EFCC. Then there should be a massive national reorientation. But most importantly, there should be consequences for bad behavior. If there are no consequences for bad behavior, corruption will be incentivized. Let's stop celebrating corrupt leaders. We should begin to celebrate role models who live by high ethical and moral standards. That's not what's obtainable at the moment. At the moment, we celebrate ill-gotten wealth, we celebrate material acquisition. And so people are incentivized to steal, to be corrupt. to take the path of corruption. And so until we begin to redefine standards of measuring success, then society will continue to operate the way we are doing right now, which will help nobody.
Well, I'm afraid everything you said is true, taken on board, but it also points a finger at, again, your political party without sort of reducing it to the level of politics, because you guys are ruling Nigeria at the moment. So a lot of the things that you're talking about can actually be initiated and expanded by your party. Now, perversely, though, unlike many countries in the West, and even some in Africa, where history has an upward direction and is always getting better, I mean, that doesn't seem to be the case in Nigeria, does it? I mean, because things seem to kind of get worse here.
I admit that things seem to get worse. It's factual, and I don't think anybody can deny that. I don't think we should deny that, not on the basis of any political affiliation at all. And there are several reasons for it. I talked about the fact that family value system has literally collapsed, and that has nothing to do with politics. Now, our educational system is also not emphasizing moral standards. You've had cases of several developments on campuses. The university campus should be a flagship of ethical behavior, but that's not the current situation. It has nothing to do with politics. But it has to do with leadership. So we try to separate leadership from politics. Now, on the fact of APC being in charge at the moment, now, mind you, some of this degeneration had taken place over the years and cannot be fixed overnight. I have no mandate to speak for the All Progressives Congress, nor the current government. I simply say the truth, the way it is. As a member of society, as a critical observer in society, as an analyst in society. And we are concerned, we should all be concerned. And I believe that many Nigerians are concerned. Good, right-thinking Nigerians are concerned about the declining moral and ethical standard in society, and that we must all do something about it. We're not going to wait for government. All of us as collective represents government. Government is not just Mr. President or the governors. All of us. We rather donated our powers to them. And so if they are not doing what we want, then we must act and change and get the kind of government we desire and deserve. So please, I don't think we should place so much emphasis on government. I agree that leadership has great responsibility of fixing things, including moral standards in society. And that's what we should emphasize, that they should fix our moral fabric, our moral standards, our ethical standards. Let's raise the bar, and let's not incentivize criminality, bad behavior, and immoral behavior.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you very much indeed and urge you to keep writing those articles and keep speaking out. Dr. Dakuku Peterside is a chieftain of the ruling APC party. He's also an author, columnist, and former member of the House of Representatives, and he was talking to me there from our studios in Lagos. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and Lagos, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.